Hey, good morning, team. And last week in the discussion boards, we had a really good discussion on self-awareness and how it relates to cultural awareness. So, anyways, this week I wanted to take a little bit of your time, and I wanted to expound some more on that, on this thing called the Johari window. And I know throughout your time at college that you have been exposed to various personality assessments and various behavioral assessments. For instance, I know many of you took the Myers-Briggs personality assessment and the predictive behavioral index assessment. And these are very good personality and behavioral tools. And I wanted to share with you why we do behavioral assessments. Because this thing called self-reflection is very, very important. It doesn't matter on the validity or the reliability of the assessment you're taking. What matters is that you are taking it and reflecting on whether or not you agree with the results. I'll say that again. It matters that you are self-reflecting on your results. So, for many years I've been hung up on, this is not me. I am not a judger. I am not a perceiver. I am not introverted. I am not this. And there's been many arguments at the PhD level on which assessment is more valid than the other. Should you use the Big Five? Should you use Spiro B? Should you use MBTI? I'll tell you what, it doesn't matter. Not in my opinion at all. What matters is that you take the time to self-reflect on the results. That's the goal. And that's the goal when we start talking about culture. So, because what we want to do is identify our blind spots. And this is one of the magics here of this Johari window. So let me go over this right now. I hope everybody can see this. So Johari came up with this basic window, and he says, hey, if we take a window and divide it into 4 panes, we have traits that are known to me. So these are behaviors that are known to me, behaviors that are unknown to me. Then we have behaviors that I do that are known to others, and behaviors that are unknown to others. Right? So we'll start up here on our first pane. This is the most easiest. So if it's a behavior that I know I do, and a behavior that you know I do, right? So for instance, I have a bad New England accent. I know it, and you're listening to me, so you know it, right? Let's call this our public domain. Now, is there anything bad about this domain? I would say sometimes, but not necessarily. This public domain means I can fix it because I know about it, and you have brought it to my attention. So hopefully I can fix it. Your feedback will help me fix it. Once again, this is the public domain. This is why we say transparency is a self-correcting behavior. So as it relates to culture, if there is something that I know, for instance, let's say I don't like people from down south because I'm a New Englander, right? I know this, and you pick up on it. It is your duty to tell me, hey, you're showing a bias here. And it is my duty to listen and to accept that feedback. That's what all leaders do, right? So let's move on to our pain here. So let's say there's something that you know that I do, but I don't. So what would we call this, right? So a behavior that you know, but I don't. That's a blind spot, right? So an example of this, like I just said, if I had a bias against people from the South, if I didn't know that, let's say, if I was up here making jokes about a Southern accent or something, and you found it offensive, once again, a good leader would solicit that input. Hey, am I doing anything? And a good follower or, a good subordinate or a good peer would say, hey, you know what, that, you mocking a Southern accent is not really professional and it can be pretty insulting, right? Once again, you get that feedback. So, how about if something is known to me, but it's unknown to others, right? This, I think, comes in very important when we start talking about this bottom page, when we start talking about culture. So known to me and unknown to others. This is our private domain. Our private domain, this is where we hide our biases, right here. This is where things come out that cost us professionally. For instance, and I'll give you a personal story. My father was in World War II, right? He was part of the occupying forces in the Marshall Islands, in Guadalcanal. He fought the Japanese. You know what? And because of that, I did not hear anything good about Japanese people when I grew up. That was my father's war, and he did not have anything nice to say. Many of you have had fathers or uncles that fought in Vietnam. I'm sure they did not have many things to say about the Vietnamese people. Or you've had family members that have fought in the Middle East. They probably have not had nice things to say about Middle Eastern people. These can form biases, right? I like to talk with my military friends on biases, a media bias that they will face when they get out of the service. For instance, if you are HR and you're hiring somebody from the military and they say, hey, I've done 3 combat tours in Iraq, your first thought is he's got PTSD, right? That's because the media has framed that bias, that whenever somebody from the media, from the military does something bad, the first thing they say is, well, he's done 3 or 2 tours in the Middle East. So you normally just start associating combat tours with post-traumatic stress or foreign tours with post-traumatic stress. That's a natural thing that occurs with media bias. So we have these biases, and this is in our private domain. Now, this one, a behavior, this is the big question mark, right? A behavior that's unknown to me and unknown to others. Well, if it's unknown to me and unknown to others, why do I care, right? Well, I care because these tend to manifest themselves. So, let me go back here. I'm going to switch colors. So, we said it is our ideal to get feedback, right? And we want to make this pane, our public domain, what is known to me and known to others. I want that to be the big domain. So what I want to do is lower this line. Does the red show up on the video? Good. So how do I do that, right? You tell me about it. You give me feedback. You tell, right? Big word. So you are making things known to me. If up here I want to move this line, and I want to shrink what's unknown to me. So I want to make it right here. How do I do that? As a leader, I ask. And then I'm moving my line here. So you see, I'm making more things public to me and to you. And that leads to self-correcting behavior. The big thing is we still have a little bit of a window down here in our question mark of behaviors that is unknown to me and unknown to others. And this is where something that's very important in the business world, a trend that has started in the last 20 years, or grown in the last 20 years, coaching. Coaching is going to shrink this window. Why? Because a coach helps you to discover what you don't know about yourself. And for instance, if you are getting feedback from people and they are saying, well, you know, Dave's a little bit aggressive, it seems, to women in the workplace, you know. A coach would say, well, Dave, why do you think that would be? asking those questions, not telling me that, hey, your workers think you're being aggressive towards females and you need to correct that behavior. A coach is saying and helping you to explore on why you might be aggressive. Big difference there. So you are doing the self-reflection and the self-correcting, the self-explaining. So once again, like I said, I thought this was important because we were talking about self-awareness and self-reflection as it relates to culture and our acceptance to culture. And I know that you guys have been exposed to different assessments, and I wanted to make sure that we understood why, because I have senior leaders in a lot of my classes, and, a lot of times it's not very clear on the importance of the self-reflection and self-assessment. But it relates to culture, and it takes a lot of feedback, a lot of growing, to realize why we have our biases. Not all biases are bad. They're not, Some of them are self-protection, For instance, if if your last trip to California and you ended up in the slums of LA, for instance, and you got beat up and mugged, you probably learned not to go back to that area of LA based on your experience. So that is a self-protective behavior. Hey, I'm not going to go back to LA, or to that area. So some of it is good. But what happens is we have these biases and they start becoming our behaviors. And when they start becoming our behaviors and we start acting on our biases, then it becomes a stereotype. And then we are not giving people the how can I say it? The respect they deserve, and everybody deserves respect. They don't need to be held accountable for their nationality or their race or where they've come from or their accent. Everybody has the ability and should be accepted for who they are and what they've done. So anywho, I wanted to explain to you about your Johari window, and I'll spell this out for you if you want to look it up. It's Johari, and I will put a link and talk about it in week 3. And I hope everybody got the the instructions on the final. Good stuff. Once again, Dave out. Thanks.